This screencast will introduce the North America realm. We will explore the diverse human and natural landscapes. In this image, we see San Francisco on the left and the remote east side of the Sierra Nevada on the right. A common map of North America reveals three countries: Canada, the United States, and Mexico. For the purposes of our investigation, only Canada and the United States are considered part of the North America realm, with Mexico included as part of the Middle America realm. This is because of the Latin American heritage that Mexico shares with its neighbors to the south. Canada and the United States share many qualities in common, including a strong British heritage, dominant English language, and Christian religion. In spite of these, there are some significant differences. Canada is officially a bilingual country with both English and French taught in schools and is used in government correspondence as well. The French-Canadian province of Quebec is the remnants of the once great French colonial presence in North America. And of course, Canada has a much smaller population than the United States, which is equivalent to roughly the size of California. Canada is also part of the British Commonwealth and never fought a war of independence as the United States did. In general, the population of North America is highly urbanized. Upwards of 80% of the people in North America live in cities, have high income levels compared to other parts of the world, high rates of resource consumption. These economies are also generally advanced, and Americans are highly mobile populations that travel and move their residences with greater regularity than those in other parts of the world. The physiographic regions of North America are useful for a general understanding of the landscape. The Great Mountains of the West, including the Sierra Nevada and Cascade Range, are part of the region known as the Pacific Mountains and Valleys. The Great Basin of Nevada eventually transitions into the Rocky Mountains of Colorado, which extend all the way into Canada. Crossing the continent to the east, we get to the Great Plains and the lower lowlands of the Mississippi Valley before climbing back to the Appalachian Highlands centered on Pennsylvania and Virginia and extending eastward. Note the low elevation coastal plains along the Gulf Atlantic coast and the Arctic. The United States and North America in general are characterized by great waterways, including the mighty Mississippi River, which is considered to be one of the greatest inland navigable water systems in the world. If one traces from the origin of the Missouri River to the mouth of the Mississippi, this is also among the longest rivers in the world. Climate in North America can be generalized in several ways. Of course, temperatures are generally cooler and colder in the north and warmer in the south. In addition, the western United States has significantly more arid, receiving much less rainfall than in the east. One can draw an approximate line splitting North America. This corresponds to the 100-degree west meridian line to separate the moist east from the arid west. The exception to this limited rainfall in the west is found in the high mountains and along the Pacific coast, especially in the north. Note the CF climates that indicate year-round precipitation, characteristic of the eastern United States, especially the southeast, and a narrow band along the Pacific Northwest coast. CS climates, on the other hand, have a distinct dry season, as characterized by much of California. These are considered Mediterranean climates. Arid climates and semi-arid climates, here denoted by the BW for arid, the light yellow, and BS for semi-arid, includes, in this case, the grasslands of the Great Plains. The D climates indicate the colder climates that are characteristic of the northeastern United States extending up into Canada. An important factor in understanding the climates of the western United States is the orographic lifting and rain shadow effects. This diagram illustrates how prevailing winds carry moisture from the Pacific Ocean up the slopes of the Coast Ranges and the Sierra Nevada. Air cools and condenses to form rain clouds, and precipitation falls as rain or snow. As air moves to the east side of the Sierra Nevada, we will see it drying and producing a rain shadow effect, so that places like Nevada see significantly lower levels of precipitation than those areas to the west of the crest of the Sierra Nevada. Moving into the human domain, this map describes the indigenous domains of North America and reveals the diversity of native peoples that occupied North America prior to European contact. Population densities were also among the highest in the world for native peoples. Early reports from explorers described the eastern seaboard as being almost continuously populated. However, European diseases quickly took a heavy toll, followed by European settlers in their search for land and resources, oftentimes behind the barrel of a gun. The early United States was characterized by several locations that can be described as cultural hearths, namely the New England and Mid-Atlantic and Tidewater regions. The frontier zones illustrate the role that the Appalachian Mountains played as a barrier to migration. One can see from the dates indicating that it took some time before population left the immediate coastal environments of the Atlantic before penetrating inland towards the Ohio Valley and eventually the Mississippi. This map illustrates migration, both European and non-European, including the forced migration of Africans through the slave trade. The Lewis and Clark expedition opened up westward expansion and revealed much about the nature of the continent. Here we see the patterns of migration through time. One can see that most migration into the 1850s was primarily from the British Isles. Moving into the 1880s, we see Germany and Scandinavia being the new immigrants. By 1900, South and East Europeans, including Italians, started to come in large numbers. They were often the discriminated minority during this time. We see a drop-off during the World War II era, and then climbing in the 1980s and continuing on to today with immigrants from both Latin America and Asia. Migrants are motivated by both push and pull factors. Pull factors draw people to a place, and maybe things like economic opportunity or religious freedom. Push factors, on the other hand, are things that drive people from their homes, whether famine, overpopulation, or war. Migrants often come from a combination of both push and pull factors. Over the years, the geographic center of population has shifted gradually from the east coast towards the center of the country. The Transcontinental Railroad, completed in 1869, played an important role as this connected east to west. In recent decades, the growth of population in the south and southwest has been most influential. It may be worth mentioning and reminding you that California, extending all the way through Texas, was once part of Mexico before it was acquired by the United States. Railroads played an important role not only in industrializing the United States, which we will see, but also providing a vital link for transportation and resulting in the distribution of population in many cases. These were also the conduit for what has been described as the Great Migration from the rural South to the urban North of African Americans, and we can trace some of the great artistic movements such as jazz music. Here, the great jazz musicians Miles Davis and John Coltrane, both of whom were Southerners whose families had migrated into the North. To understand the geography of North America, it's helpful to consider how economies and urban areas have grown through time. And we can do this by, first of all, looking at the pattern of population, here reflected by the nighttime sky. One can easily discern urban areas and the spiraling outward of interstate highways connecting smaller towns. Of course, the United States is a prodigious consumer of energy, with 5% of the population roughly in the United States consuming close to 20% of global resources, including petroleum products. One can see a similar pattern looking at population distribution. This is also a reminder of the larger concentration of population in the eastern half of the United States, especially in the lower Great Lakes region and extending into the eastern seaboard, which is described as a megalopolis as a result of the near continuous population and urbanization from Washington in the south, extending through the cities of Philadelphia, New York, and through to Boston in the north. Of course, one can see the large population centers in the west, including Los Angeles, the San Francisco Bay Area, Portland, Seattle, and Vancouver. The sparsely populated west is evident as well, with concentrations of populations in places like Salt Lake City, Utah, and Denver, Colorado. These maps of ethnic distribution in the United States show some distinct patterns. Native American populations are most highly concentrated in reservations in the West. The Hispanic population is highest along the border with Mexico, but there has been a growth in the Latino population in many parts of the United States, as this is the fastest growing population. The percentage of blacks is highest in the southern states, although there is large populations that are found in urban cities in the north, reflecting the great migration discussed earlier. Finally, Asian populations are found most notably in the West, although there are also significant populations in the large urban areas. Here we will look at three distinct periods of urban and industrial development and economic growth. The first is the frontier resources period. One sees characteristics such as dense, small, walkable cities. And this is a time when urbanization was quite low. Most people lived on the farm. The next period is industrial capitalism, which saw growth of manufacturing in the lower Great Lakes region around cities like Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Detroit, Michigan, and Chicago, Illinois. This provided quite a boost to urbanization and is reflected in the industrialization of North America that happened after 1850. Global capitalism and the knowledge economy, this is entering this period that we describe as globalization. And in terms of growth of our cities, we begin to see the growth of urban ghettos and suburban sprawl, eventually leading to traffic congestion. And we'll see a level of urbanization now approaching 80%. We'll discuss these in greater detail in the coming screencast. This scene of Lower Manhattan in the early part of the 19th century reflects just how dense and how oriented around walking and a mixture of residence and business that early cities in North America characterized. Early mass transit reflected here with the cable cars of San Francisco in the lower right, a ferry boat found in Southern California, and streetcars in the east were some of the earliest types of mass transit and began to allow people to move out of the often noisy and dirty central cities. The idea of disamenities refers to the noise, pollution, oftentimes lack of sanitation that characterized many of these early and rapidly industrializing cities. Of course, eventually, with the development of the interstate highway system, we saw a rapid level of urbanization and sprawl. Here, Interstate 80 in the East Bay of Berkeley shows a familiar sight to anyone who lives in urban or suburban areas of the United States. Many cities became characterized by urban blight. At least certain neighborhoods became characterized. Unfortunately, there are some examples of whole cities that have become blighted. Detroit, Michigan, Camden, New Jersey, several examples. The so-called rural ideal, in which the suburbs were to be peaceful places in which one had open space and access to nature, is something that drew a lot of people out to the suburbs. But of course, traffic sprawl has created a situation that has made these places less desirable. Meanwhile, we've recognized some of the damaging elements of such patterns of development, such as habitat loss and fragmentation. When one considers the role of carbon dioxide through fossil fuel burning in global warming, one can see that living in more densely populated cities has distinct benefits. Planners have therefore used zoning laws to encourage certain types of land use, in particular mixed use land use. You see high density residential areas, and this is a characteristic process that is being used in cities around the United States. Increasingly, there is efforts at what has been described as smart growth to encourage more walkable and bikeable cities, also to provide improved access not only to work but play and community elements as well. This is often described as livability, improving the livability of cities. And this has become a blueprint for what is described as new urbanism, in which providing walkable areas, places that are appealing for people to live and work and recreate. Of course, San Francisco in many ways represents this movement where we have large public spaces and appealing architecture. Here we see the high-rise development that is creating greater and greater density in San Francisco. So we see a change in the structure of cities through time, where we initially saw them industrialize, providing a pull factor. As disamenities become more and more evident in the city, we see this movement to the outer cities, eventually a loss of investment in the inner cities, leading to urban blight, the suburbanization, these edge cities developing, and eventually a movement towards smart growth, a return to the city, a return of investment, especially as we've seen some of the consequences of sprawl, including traffic congestion. Some representative cities considered. And just a reminder about this trend towards urbanization, and one can see, for example, the rate of urbanization in the United States as compared to our neighbors to the south. One goes towards India and China and sees dramatically lower levels of urbanization than we see in North America and much of Europe. There are lots of interesting ways to look at a particular place, and in this case, the economy of the states is equated to other countries. So, for example, California's economy is equivalent to that of Italy, ranks us in California somewhere around 7th worldwide for economies. A reminder of just how wealthy and productive the U.S. economy is relative to other places. Okay, we'll see you online.